people that would treat them differently, they wouldn't even be attracted to.
Yeah, that is almost like a biology, isn't it, at that point?
It's biologically imprinted in the brain. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be superseded or healed, but only through some kind of conscious awareness. Automatically, it'll have a hard time healing itself.
Do you meditate, Doctor?
I'm glad you asked me today and not 3 weeks ago, because right now the answer is yes.
What happened 2 weeks ago? No meditation?
Well, when I don't pursue mindfulness in my life, I easily fall into my workaholic and externally hungry behavior patterns, which don't lead to good consequences.
Understood.
So life is a way of slapping me upside, on the head and to get back to where you need to get back to. Get back to where you once belonged, as the Beatles song says, So for me, that has to involve, I'm not describing anything, but for me, that has to involve some mindfulness work on a regular basis.
Have you ever met Thich Nhat Hanh?
Only through his books. I've got about a dozen of them on my shelves. I'd say every time I go through a spiritual crisis, I buy another book. So I've got a whole lot of his books. And I've even read some of them.
He's quite remarkable to be around. Absolutely like being in the presence of Buddha. Yeah. With no ideology projected onto you. It is a delight. Oh, my God.
All right, well, you know what? That sounds wonderful.
He's in the south of France most of the time.
He's got a village there, doesn't he?
And yes. And
Plum Village or something he calls it?
Plum Village in San Diego area. Just before San Diego, he has Deer Park Monastery. But if you ever want to get away for about 7 to 10 days and absolutely bathe in mindfulness, it is unbelievable. I spent 3-4 days with him and
in France, or
actually here in Deer Park. He'll be here over the summer, but he's also in France now.
Would you be kind enough to send me an email?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm on the West Coast, so San Diego is very easily accessible for me.
Sure. He usually comes in August.
Okay.
But sometimes time is of the essence. He is up there in age, and you never know, and he's quite frail.
Must be. Yeah, no, I'd just be delighted to even consider that.
Yeah.
The idea. I mean, I am taking holidays all summer, so, but maybe I'll do that.
I think it would be awesome because there are some things that are indescribable.
I'm sure.
There's some things, and he is, I would say, one of the great masters of mindfulness and receptivity like I've never seen. But when you use that word, it reminded me of Thai.
Well, no question. And, I found his teachings really important in my own development.
You gave an example about people studying, students that found themselves very lonely and how their immunity was highly diminished.
Well, again, this is just another marker of the mind-body unity.
Yes.
2 studies are worth mentioning here. One is medical students who, under the stress of examinations, are found to have suppressed immune activity. But it's those students in the class who are most emotionally isolated who find the most suppression of the immune responses. So emotional isolation magnifies stress. That's one study about students. The other study about students that's interesting is in West Point at the military academy, where the American military learn how to bomb the rest of the world. The students, the cadets entering West Point, were studied for their response to the Epstein-Barr virus, the EB virus, which is the causative agent of infectious mononucleosis. And so the people that were most likely to be infected with the virus and to develop the illness were those students whose fathers had been high achievers, but the students were failing of those high standards that the fathers had set.
How interesting.
So the fear of judgment and the sense of failure suppressed the immune system as well.
See, this is mind-boggling in a way. Mind-boggling in the sense that science wouldn't ordinarily be looking at this.
Well, but that's just what's so amazing. And the first chapter of my book, When the Body Says No, is entitled The Bermuda Triangle, precisely because so many of these studies have been done and published and validated, and they disappear without a trace as far as medical practice is concerned. So that's what's really mind-boggling. To me, it's not mind-boggling that the studies have been done because they make sense to me. What is mind-boggling is that they've been done and so chronically ignored.
Almost as if disappearing into the vacuum.
Hence the title of the first chapter, the Bermuda Triangle, where, ships disappear without a trace.
Yes, indeed. Can we talk a little about Gilda Radner, the great, beloved Gilda Radner?
Sure. Well, in writing this book, aside from looking at the medical research and case examples and all that, I also looked up the biographies of famous people who I knew had suffered or died from certain diseases, like Lou Gehrig, like Lance Armstrong and his testicular cancer, and like Gilda Radner with her ovarian cancer. Now, I knew nothing about the biographies of any of these people before reading them. I just knew that they had this disease, whichever disease they had. But what was remarkable is that in every case, including saliently in Gilda's case, the life patterns and emotional patterns that I had been talking about were present to the nth degree. Gilda died of ovarian cancer, as you know, and she had been a very unhappy child. She was an overweight child. The reason she was thin as an adult was because she was bulimic. And her mother never knew that. So Gilda spent her whole life protecting her mom from the knowledge that she was a bulimic. Her father died when she was 12, and that's a loss she never overcame, really. One consequence was that she kept putting herself into relationships with men where she would suppress herself in order to please the guy, which is not uncommon for women, of course, and it's a major source of stress. And then she was a bulimic, a closet bulimic, so all the time that she was a star, she'd be binging and throwing up. And when she developed ovarian cancer, she was still trying to please everybody. She developed intestinal obstruction. Her bowels didn't work. It was a complication of ovarian cancer. And she actually wrote about it in her biography, that my dilemma was how to please everybody. Because I'd asked everybody's advice, but now if I follow this person's advice, so-and-so might be hurt. So it's her body's actually shutting down, and she's still worried about whose advice to follow, not as to what might be best for her, but how do I please all these different people.
We would never know sometimes what people go through.
Well, she wrote about it, and then when she looks like she survived ovarian cancer, then she becomes like a poster girl for the disease, cover of Life magazine and all that, and a symbol of successful recovery. And then she turns out that the cancer comes back. And then she says, I felt like a failure, like I let everybody down. Here she is with her cancer, and she still thinks she owes it to everybody else, not for herself, but for others, not to have disease. And at the very end of her life, only at the very end of her life, she actually begins to get it. She actually writes, and I will quickly find the page for you so I can read you her exact words. And she says, only close to her death did Gilda finally learn that she could not be mother to the world. And she writes, I couldn't do everything I wanted to do. I couldn't keep calling all the cancer patients I knew, and I couldn't try to help heal all the women with ovarian cancer, and I couldn't read every letter I received because it was ripping me apart. I couldn't cry all those tears for everybody else. I had to take care of myself. It is important to realize that you have to take care of yourself because you can't take care of anybody else until you do. But even that last line, she still doesn't quite get it. She's still justifying looking after herself because that will allow me to take care of others. But at least she's realizing that she can't just continue to take care of others all the time. But of course, by the time she realized it, her body had said no in a massive way, and she didn't live much longer.
That was so sad.
But her story, and right now there are these organizations that were founded, or at least in the memory of Gilda Radner, to deal with ovarian cancer. They never talk about this stuff. The real lesson of Gilda's life is never applied, and her life is only emblematic of the life of anybody with cancer, or chronic illness for that matter.
You talk a lot about boundaries and people's ability to set boundaries being one of the keys to keeping your immune system healthy.
Well, you have to know where you end and somebody else starts. You can't take on other people's stuff. If you do, you're going to suffer. And so that's all I mean by boundaries. In a lot of marriages, women, for example, the husband is angry. The woman right away makes it about herself. How can I mitigate his anger? How can I propitiate his displeasure? But as soon as you start doing that, you've abandoned yourself, and you've taken on somebody else, and you've blurred your boundaries.
People take on a lot of things that they don't even know they're taking
yes,
on.
and our